We've got Mark from New York. Pronouns are he, him. Wants to talk about intelligent design. Mark, how are you doing today?
Hey, what's going on, man?
How are you? I'm having a fantastic day. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yes. You know what? Let me not watch the YouTube channel and listen to it on the phone like I was directed to.
I appreciate you figuring that out before we had to tell you. So many people where I'm like, I can hear myself 80 times.
Yeah. So actually, I did want to talk to Forrest about something, and it's John. I don't think we've ever spoken before. I'm not sure if you also have a background in biology. So
oh, I certainly don't, except for being a biological organism. That's about it.
Yeah, that experience.
So, Forrest, we spoke. It was maybe like a week ago, and I mentioned we were discussing intelligent design and the origin of life research that's been going on, and sort of I mentioned Dr. Tor to you.
Okay, I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what's been going on, and I think it's helpful because I think sometimes you need to, in order to like get the truth to come out, you need to have people. You need the adversarial context for that to happen, and which is I think how the scientific process is supposed to work. But sometimes like there's somewhat of a dogma that happens within science, and certain things kind of become taboo, and people within the scientific community who hold views that are kind of on the periphery of the consensus position, like often have to like kind of get through that logjam. And I think there's just like a history of that happening. Like even when you just look back in the 20th century, like in physics and cosmology, like eventually the truth does come out, but it often is like it's often like a winding path for that to happen. And I think in particular, like what's happened with the intelligent design hypothesis is that they've kind of been somewhat I don't even know, they've kind of been ostracized. Like there's people who have submitted, like Stephen Meyer like published a paper in one of the journals that the Smithsonian publishes. I forgot what it's called, and the editor of that journal basically got like fired. His entire career was destroyed because
right. Do you know why that's the case though? Do you know why people who promote intelligent design are ostracized and why those papers don't get published, and when they do, it's a bad time?
Why?
It's because intelligent design is not a theory. It's just religion playing science. It's the newest way of saying creationism that sounds almost scientific, and it's something which has no scientific basis. The entire intelligent design argument is I don't have a way of explaining X, therefore God. And that's it. And like I said to the last caller, even if you take, Stephen Meyer and Michael Behe and James Tour and all these other people who many of them are, very, like all three of the people I just listed have PhDs in some sort of science or another, except for I think Stephen Meyer does philosophy of science, whatever it is.
Right.
These are educated people. They're not dumb, but their whole job is to say, I don't know how this happened, and therefore my Christian belief system is founded. And that's not how scientific thinking works. And they, of all people, should know that very well. So whenever you have these people trying to promote their belief system, the reason why it doesn't go over very well is because that's not how you structure any argument ever in science. Even if they could prove entirely that evolution made no sense whatsoever, that there was absolutely no explanation for the biodiversity that we see around us, then all they would be able to say is, I have no explanation for biodiversity. If they wanted to prove God and that there's this creationist or intelligent design idea, they would first have to prove that this God exists, then prove that it did create everything, then prove that or I should say, prove that it can create everything, then that it did, and then start talking about how. So, like, when you put your God on my dissection table, we'll talk. But until then, all you have is I don't get how this works. Therefore, I have a better explanation, and it happens to be the exact one that I was born into and raised to believe in the right interpretation of the right translation of the right book that's been interpreted and translated for the past 2,000 years. And I got the right one. And it's just not a scientific argument at all.
That was a lot to
Well,
process.
I
What's
think
your response to that?
okay. So my so my response to that is that there's a very fine line. I agree with Forrest that they're really riding up against what I think. I don't agree. I'm trying to be objective, and I do believe in God. I sort of want, more in their camp, and I want them to be right. But I'm really trying to be objective, and I think, like, with the way Stephen Meyer approaches the issue, I think it goes right up into the line, but I don't really think it's fair to call what he's doing like a pseudoscience, like to just lump him in with the creationists, because he really is careful in what Meyer's approach is that he basically took this from Darwin, where Darwin was looking back historically to try to postulate a cause. And his method was, if you're trying to basically come up with a cause for an event in the distant past, what you could do is look at causes that are that are present, like present causes that are known to produce the same effect as the cause that you're trying to explain for that distant event. And so this was like in The Origin of Species. I'm probably not doing a great job of describing it, but Meyer explains this by basically saying, like, a kind of a light bulb went off for him, and he's taking that same approach that Darwin used for evolution and applies it for intelligent design.
So two things. Number one, you're talking about that there's this cause, that you can see reproduces the same results over and over and over again. What results do we have from this God that we can prove?
No, so for example, there's a really interesting interview with Richard Dawkins. Ben Stein interviewed him for this movie, and he asked him this question.
Are you talking about Expelled? Expelled?
Exactly.
Ben Stein's movie where he compares teaching evolution in colleges to the literal Holocaust?
No, I actually didn't. I didn't hear that part. I mean, I don't remember that part of the movie. There's a part of that movie.
Yeah, it's right at the beginning.
He interviews Dawkins. Oh, it is. Wait, he compares what?
He compares the fact that universities force professors to teach evolution and doesn't allow them to teach creationism to fucking Nazis. That's like how he opens the film, if I remember correctly.
Okay, well, that's crazy. I mean, I can't.
Yeah,
that sounds crazy. But he interviews Dawkins, and at one point Dawkins basically says, like, no, it could be like a space alien, like the panspermia hypothesis. So it doesn't have to be God. It's the intelligent design argument is not like a theistic. It's consistent with theism, but it doesn't say the Christian God did it. It's just saying there was design, and we kind of pushes it back to saying we don't know who the designer was. It could have been
but I think you're putting way too much credit to the word could. It could be aliens. It could be a god. It could be that this whole world is a dream that I'm having right now and that I'll wake up in a few minutes. It could be that this is a video game I forgot I was playing that's very realistic. Could doesn't mean probable, likely, any of that. At the end of the day, all of science could be an illusion that was created by Satan, that he put the light at just the right distance to make it look like the universe is as old as it is, and he put fossils in the ground to make us believe it. Sure, why not?
Right.
But that doesn't mean that's a reasonable thing to believe. There could be gremlins in my attic instead of mice, but I don't believe that.
No, absolutely. you need epistemic warrants for your beliefs. Like you can't, it's not enough to just say like something is possible and therefore like, I mean, that's not a reason to believe something. I'm just saying like, because just bringing it back to what we were talking about, like Meyer took Darwin's approach and tried to apply it to like the origin of life. And like, you know, in response, you said something about like, well, how do you know it was God? And I was just basically saying like, he wasn't saying like this was God. He was just, the argument is just like there's a designer, and that, you know, one of the inferences, like it's like an abductive argument, like which, you know, there's multiple competing hypotheses. Like one could be evolution. It could have been, you know, the process of random mutation and all that. And this is an alternative hypothesis. And, you know, I haven't read Meyer's books, but the way I understand he goes about it is that he looks at like, what is the probability like of when you look at this, like the probability sort of like the search space of like, what this is something that the prior caller was talking about, like when you have like the DNA molecule, and that, I guess number one, like there's this challenge for evolution, which is like, what is the origin of biological information? Like, where does that information originate from? And do you have an answer for that, Forrest, or?
Yes. So when you talk about biological information, I'm assuming you're talking about like nucleic acids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We find, so DNA and RNA are made of 5 nitrogenous bases: adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. We found literally all 5 of those on meteors in space. They self-assemble by themselves. They don't need magic to do that, and they polymerize and chain together by themselves. They don't need magic to do that. And also, depending on which one you're going for, I'm a big fan of the RNA world hypothesis. RNA can work as both genetic information and also as a catalyst for lots of biochemical reactions. So it would be not only the information carrying molecule, but also the thing that's causing a lot of life to happen. Case in point, when I talked about DNA transcription and translation, you transcribe DNA into mRNA, that's the messenger RNA that goes out and encodes for a protein. mRNA is read by a ribosome. Ribosomes are made of RNA, rRNA. Those ribosomes then connect to transfer RNA, which bring over the amino acids to build the protein. So RNA tells RNA which RNA to connect to build the proteins. So like, yeah, this is all stuff that you can do in a jar. None of this is magical.
Well, no, it's, well, the issue is that the origin of life, like, I mean, when they looked at the cell, like when you have like for example, like this is, again, I'm not somebody like who's very knowledgeable in this field, but when you looked at the Miller-Urey experiment from the 1950s, where they tried to basically replicate like some of the prebiotic conditions on, you know, on the early Earth, there were so many, like if you look, that was in the 1950s. And if you look at like where we are now, like generally science, like, you know, inches forward towards, it makes progress. It's incremental progress. Sometimes it's slow, but it usually moves towards the goalpost. And what seems to be happening in this field of research is that they're actually making like reverse progress. Like they've discovered that the cell is so much more complex than we ever imagined. And they're nowhere near, like, it's not like they've gotten closer to describing the origin of life. They're further away from describing the origin of life, because as they keep learning more in this area, they keep realizing like the difficulty of life originating through purely, you know, random processes. Now, it's either, we know life.
That's not true.
On Earth, so why do you say that? Like for the RNA world hypothesis, for example, like that's been out for a while. Like that was like 2005, wasn't it? And I don't think,
like, here's the thing, is that number one, Urey and Miller did their famous experiment, yes, in the 1950s, and they showed that amino acids self-assemble from very basic, ordinary chemicals you find all over the universe under remarkably mundane conditions. That was also 70 years ago. And we've done a lot of other things like that since then, which have consistently over and over shown that not just amino acids, but all of the basic building blocks of life self-assemble under remarkably mundane conditions. So, like, for example, we just talked about the five, nitrogenous bases of nucleic acid. We have all the amino acids here. We've also found amino acids on asteroids in space. The things that make lipids. There's four major biological macromolecules: nucleic acids, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. So, nucleic acids and proteins we've covered.
Right.
Lipids and carbohydrates made of fatty acids and sugars, respectively. Again, self-assemble. Again, we found them in space. And also the way that all of those things chain together and polymerize is not a mystery to us. So, like, even if, like, there are certain gaps in our knowledge, because you're right, we have found that things are very, very complex, and there's certain things that we don't understand yet. But, like, we have step 1, step 2, step 3, we're missing step 4, and then we have 5 through 100. And so, like, if you want to say, well, you don't have step 4, and that means that's God, what are you going to do in 20 years when we find step 4? Because right now you're making the same argument that was made 30 years ago when we didn't have step 7 or 8 either. And then we found those. And then you're like, but step 4! And, like, that's just not good enough. And that's why, again, intelligent design is not a theory. It's just, I don't know how this works, therefore Jesus. And that's not science.
I want to pop in real quick. Mark,
please do. I feel like I've been talking this whole time.
No, it's good. I'm not a scientician, nor do I pretend to be one on YouTube. But I can tell you this, something that you said, Mark, that stuck out to me 50 to 90 hours ago when we started this call, was that you wanted to believe the intelligent design community were onto something, that it sounded like you had a vested interest in that being sort of the underdog, rising to the top and coming to the fore of the scientific consensus in some way. And to me, that said a lot. And I knew that there was a lot of science, and so Forrest is certainly the man for that. Why do you want that to be the scientific consensus? What is your personal motivation for that being the prevailing theory for life?
That's a very good question. I really don't know, actually. Like, it's a great question. I mean, some of it is like, honestly, like, some of this gets somewhat tribal, where, like, like, people who are on one side, where you're defending, like, claims, and sometimes, like, people on the other side who have like an opposing view, you kind of, like, I'm competitive, and so, like, I want to win. I want to be right. I want to win the argument. And so, like, if I think God exists, and this is like a sort of metaphysical theory / I know Forrest doesn't want to call it a scientific theory, but to the extent, it falls into that category, like, it's something that is consistent with the God hypothesis. And so, I'm kind of hoping that's correct. If it's
you're
not,
hoping that's correct. Mark, it sounds like you're motivated through some sort of personal identity issue. It sounds like you have put your flag on the ground of theism. You staked it out, and you say, this is my position, this is my side, and I'm going to defend it, and I have a personal motivation for this being the truth. And I would suggest that maybe if you could let go of that tribalism that you have identified, if you've let go of that sort of egotism or egoism, I can never remember which one's which, and just look at the study, look at the how the science is progressing, look at it not in terms of working backward from a conclusion, but following the evidence where it leads. Instead of just trying to fight to win, you might get at a different understanding of the world. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the non-believer in God position, but I am. But I'm also saying that you're spinning your wheels trying to justify your side winning. Maybe just let go of that, and try another method.
I mean, you're right.
I know. I've said that before. I'm sorry. I did that. I used that one already. I know. I'm sorry. Go on. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, like, you're right. I mean, we have to. Self-deception is always, like, the biggest risk that we're just
Yeah.
deceiving ourselves into believing something, that's like, so I
Mark,
totally agree
yeah.
with you.
Mark, I don't know. I don't know
Um,
any of the stuff. Somebody in the chat
but
said, "Oh, Johnny knows this stuff as well as Forrest." No, he doesn't. I don't know. All I can tell you is that I've never been convinced of a God claim. It's always shoddy evidence. And you and Forrest can talk about all this amazing discoveries, not through the process of theology have we reached this, but by close investigation of the actual world around us. We have looked at DNA and we've looked at biological processes and physiological things that are going on. Yeah, I sound like a real noob because I don't know any of this stuff. But I can tell you, your position that a God done it has less explanatory power than we don't know. And we're kind of spinning wheels here. And another thing, last thing I'm going to say, and I think Forrest is going to want to take us someplace else. You haven't read the work of the people that you're citing to. Don't you think that might be something you should do before you call an atheist call-in show?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I haven't read the book, but I've absorbed the material through like lectures and like, listening to them speak. And so like, but no, absolutely. Like that's
All right,
something
all
I
right,
plan
all
on
right.
doing. I have other books, like on
Yeah.
my list. And I think it's through, I mean, the reason I'm calling is because like,
Yeah.
I want to test the veracity of my beliefs and,
Right.
just talking to people that hold the same beliefs as you do, like you're not going to
Yeah.
do that probably as effectively. But because I know you guys want to talk to somebody else soon.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention that Dr. Tor is not actually an intelligent design advocate. He is associated with the Discovery Institute, but because of the reasons that Forrest mentioned, like Dr. Tor basically said, like, I'm a synthetic chemist, he's an organic chemist, and he's basically like, intelligent design doesn't give me the tools in which to measure like whether like I guess he kind of has like a testability issue with it from he's wearing the hat of a chemist. So he's not an intelligent designer, but what he's doing is reviewing the work of people in the original life community and sort of like, I don't want to use this in a pejorative way, but he's kind of exposing them because they're really making these, like, he basically puts it as like they're deceiving people. They're making these claims that are just so broad and unsubstantiated. And then when he gets into reading the papers, he's like, he spots all these issues. And so this is all kind of going on right now, like over the YouTube channels where he's putting out a series of videos. And I would just, I would encourage not just you two gentlemen, but just the listeners of the show to engage with that material, just as
and also I would encourage everybody listening to go listen to other professional PhD chemists who have come out against everything that Dr. Tour is saying and like call them out for not actually teaching real. See, I'm not a chemist, so I don't propose to like tear into Dr. Tour. I can tell you that when I took organic chemistry in college, Dr. Green did not need to rely on anything that Dr. Tour was saying to make sense of his arguments. So shout out to you, Dr. Green. You were the best freaking chemistry professor ever. But with that, we're going to move on because I'm not trying to make this show just an advertisement for James Tour. But Mark, feel free to call back anytime. We'll talk more about why life doesn't need a biological supernatural explanation. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.